Be still, my soul, the Lord is on your side. Bear patiently the cross of grief or pain.
Good night. Welcome back to episode 3, the final episode of this 3-part, delving into the Gospel of Mark. And last week, on the last episode, we went into like the first 6 chapters, more or less. So this time, we'll finish it all up, and hopefully, you all took my advice last week and you read through the Gospels. Very short. You said that they should finish it in like an hour.
Yeah.
So, welcome back.
Thank you, Betcha Bud. It's good to see you. Thank you. It's good to be here. It's good to be here.
Would you like to open up as usual with your prayer?
I would love to. Thank you very, very much. Thank you very much. Again, kind of composition of the place as we approach the Gospel of Mark. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Oh, dear Saint Mark, as the author of the very first Gospel, we ask you for your insight and prayers this day and throughout the year as we study your Gospel. We pray that God's Spirit may enlighten and guide us as it did you those many centuries ago. Pray that the Spirit awakens within us a deeper reverence, love, and understanding of the good news that you first wrote about and taught. And pray that following our journey with Christ through Advent, we may arise on Christmas morning alive with the good news of Christ born anew within us. For all these hopes we pray. Amen.
Nice.
Thank you.
So, where do we begin today?
As kind of like a little recap from last week, what I did is I broke the first kind of 8 chapters of Mark into 3 little segments. And they began with Mark depicting the baptism of Jesus. Mm-hmm. And these episodes showed Jesus teaching and these acts of power. And each of these little episodes, these 3 episodes, ended kind of bleakly. Mm-hmm. So the first time it ended with the Sadducees and scribes planning and plotting to destroy him. The second section, after all the signs and wonders, are in the village, his own village, his family, and they just their lack of faith allows miracles to not happen. And he's kind of, what? And then the third, again, these wonders, signs and happening, and it concludes with his disciples in the boat, and they just don't get it. And he, remember, you saw the multiplication of loaves, you saw this, and they don't understand.
And then it's very interesting because if he was trying to use this gospel to convince people, you'd kind of expect him to, embellish it and say, he preached this and everyone believed him and these guys believed him. And so I think the opposition kind of lends credence to, I guess, like the historicity of this gospel.
I think the same thing. I think Mark is giving us a foreshadowing. So the author Mark is giving is that the message was not received by everybody. And I think we hinted at this a little bit 2 weeks ago. And that was with the matters of introduction. Mm-hmm. The community that Mark was writing to may very well have been undergoing persecution. Mm-hmm. And so to have Jesus misunderstood and persecuted and even his closest friend not understand, you can see, is that what that community was undergoing? One thought had even been in it, so we've got the foreshadowing. I haven't said anything yet in it, but those that know the story, Judas, one of the 12, will betray Jesus.
Yeah, and I think Mark already says that,
that
he will betray him. Mm-hmm, so this isn't like a secret. It's like, Judas will betray him.
Did that happen in Mark's community? Did Christians, to preserve life, or did they give up names, or did they betray, or did things happen to them that put them at odds? It's kind of hard to tell, but you wonder. And so I've wondered on some of the things that Mark is depicting as happening to Jesus. I think happened. I mean, I really do. I think Jesus was persecuted. But I think Mark is also doing that to lend support to his community. That, yeah, this happened to Jesus, and I know it happened to you guys, but we're in this together.
Yeah.
That's what I think. But so this kind of as a kind of a prequel to tonight, the next three, what I would call segments of Mark's gospel, focus on two things. If you broke Mark's gospel down, there's a whole section which we finished last week is his ministry in Galilee, and then the gospel ends with a ministry in Jerusalem, and of course the Passion. Well, that little connecting piece, and it's interesting in Mark, it's expanded to chapters in Luke's gospel, is this journey to Jerusalem. So again, going from Galilee to Jerusalem, there's a journey, and we'll start with that journey tonight.
Okay.
And so there is a healing, and it's unique to Mark. And this healing can be found in chapter 8, verse 22. And it's the cure of the blind man at Bethsaida. And this is, again, unique to Mark. And it's interesting that Mark begins the journey section of his gospel with this healing of a blind man. And he will end the journey section with a healing of a blind man. Mm-hmm. And again, when we last week made that reference to the Markan sandwich, you can even see the sandwich section of his gospel, with stories of blind men being healed. And in between those two stories is the segment of the journey. Mm-hmm. So it's really interesting. It's very, very interesting. It also, this healing of the blind man, it has Jesus give another example at least Mark giving another example of Jesus having the secret. So after he cures the blind man, and it takes him 2 goes at it, Jesus sent him home saying, "Do not even go into the village." So don't even do that. So don't go there. And there's all kinds of reasons for this secret. The one I think makes the most sense is the use of the term Messiah. I think what Jesus is going to hint at, and we're actually going to begin that, Jesus will begin to predict his passion. And it includes suffering. But there is a triumphal image associated with the Messiah. And so some scholars and commentators were suggesting that was Jesus telling people to be quiet and not, just don't tell people things. Mm-hmm. Were they misusing or misunderstanding his role as Messiah? Mm. Did they envision this heroic, triumphant, we're going to kick out the Romans? Yeah. And that's what they expected. And Jesus, don't tell people that, because that's not what I'm going to be. And that's a possibility of trying to understand these notions where Jesus is deliberately telling people, don't tell people that. Don't tell people that. And it's at least 9 times in the gospel. If my count is, I think it was 9. And so right after the cure is Peter's confession. Yeah. Who do you say that I am? And it's interesting. There's these other Old Testament images. Some say you're John the Baptist, others Elijah, others, one of the prophets.
I don't quite understand this verse here. Like, why would he be, John the Baptist or another prophet?
It's a good question. I think it goes back to what was Jesus doing? And these were images
Mhm.
that the people saw and like, oh, you're doing things like John the Baptist. John the Baptist, preached, the kingdom and repentance.
So it's not like literal, like you are John the Baptist, like you are like John the
That's
Baptist.
how I'm reading it.
Okay.
Or there's something about Elijah. And so that would encourage me, okay, let me go read these stories about Elijah. What was Elijah doing?
He was like assumed into heaven. Right?
Yeah. Now there's another image coming right up about Elijah, which I think has a different take on it. But it does raise the question, is Jesus doing something that in the minds of the people, these are the images that call to mind? So like some of the prophets challenged the kings and the rulers, look, you guys are sinning, stop sinning, you need to do this, come back to God. Do this, come back to God. Listen, obey, don't be doing this. So is Jesus clearly doing that with the scribes and it's clearly the chief priests? Is he challenging them in their understanding of Torah? Much like some of the prophets, like Jeremiah would do with some of the kings. Amos and Hosea really goes after the kings in the north. Or the king Ahab, just accused of adultery. In other words, what he's doing is he's allowing the worship of other gods to take place. And it's like, no, you can't do that. There's only one God. Right?
In Matthew's gospel, this is usually followed up with, that iconic line, right, where he's given the keys of the kingdom, and this is like
that's only
omitted here.
That's only in Matthew. Yeah, it's not in Luke either. It's only in Matthew. Which is interesting. I'd forgotten about that. Here I've been kind of looking at Mark and that kind of forgetting, like, oh yeah, that's not here. That's not there. That's not there. So there's something about Matthew, the author, that in including that piece for Peter, it's important. And I think there is some Old Testament references to keys.
I think that's in like Isaiah 16 with like the keys to the house of David, right?
I think that's exactly right. Yeah.
I think it was given to what was it? I'll remember the name.
No, well done. Wow. Yes. Yeah. And that would be really fitting for Matthew's gospel, because Matthew's gospel is probably Jewish converts, and they would get it. They would get that reference right away. But here, and even if Mark heard it or knew it, his choice not to include it, I think, would reflect more on his audience. It wouldn't make sense to them. So there's this. So Peter makes his confession.
So it's Isaiah 22. He gave the keys to Eliakim.
Okay, Eliakim. Yeah. So one of the keys. Yeah. So one of the kings. Yeah.
Servant. Yeah. So he'll place on his shoulder the key to the house of David. What he opens, no one can shut, and what he shuts, no one can open. I'll drive him like a peg firm into place. He will become a seat of honor for the house of the Father. So like there's like a parallel between Isaiah 22 and Matthew 16.
Yeah. Good. And exactly that. I think you're right. That's excellent. Yeah, especially with Matthew's gospel, in all the Jewish context and references and images and symbols. Matthew was so Jewish, it's not funny. And really, the more you understand pieces of the Old Testament, the images in Matthew just pop, and I'm like, oh wow, right. That's why he would say that. So back to Mark. So this notion. So after Peter makes his confession, right? Again, here it is, verse 29. Peter spoke up and said to him, "You are the Christ," in verse 30. And he gave them strict orders not to tell anyone about him, So here's another example of Jesus in this kind of secret. And then in Mark's gospel, what immediately follows is the first of three. And I'm going to, if I can pay attention to this, Mark does a lot with threes. So here's the first of 3 passion predictions. And we'll see 3 come about, and we'll see 3. And again, as I was noticing more and more, I said, well, this is clever. This is a skilled storyteller trying to put these little pieces together. So it was only a couple of verses. And Jesus began to tell them that the Son of Man was destined to suffer grievously and to be rejected by the elders and chief priests and scribes and to be put to death. And after 3 days to rise again. One little thing to point out in this first, notice it says the elders, chief priests, and the scribes. Mark's gospel does not point fingers at the Pharisees, which is interesting. Why that's the case, I don't know. But it's the chief priests, the scribes, and the elders they're the ones that plotted to destroy Jesus, and they're the ones that will be at the trial. But the Pharisees they're not going to play a role in this. And so Peter's going to rebuke him. You can't do that. And Jesus tells him, "Get behind me, Satan. You are thinking not as God. You're thinking not as God thinks, but as human." So here's this drastic image of the Son of Man suffering and being put to death. And like, okay, that's what we're going to do. So there's a couple of interesting little things on following Christ. What do you need to do? If anyone wants to be a follower of mine, let him renounce himself, take up his cross, and follow me. So some of the conditions, right? And now chapter 9 opens up with this interesting story of the transfiguration.
Yep.
Now, I wrestle with this. Okay, so the image is, Peter, and we just kind of read the story. So 6 days later, Jesus took with him Peter, James, and John and led them up a high mountain on their own by themselves. While he was in their presence, he was transfigured. His clothes became brilliantly white, whiter than any earthly bleacher could make them. Elijah appeared to them with Moses, and they were talking to Jesus. And then Peter spoke, "Rabbi, it is wonderful for us to be here. So let us make 3 shelters, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah." He did not know what to say. They were so frightened. And a cloud came covering them. "This is my son, the beloved. Listen to him." So here's a second reference to son. So that question of sonship from baptism. Now more people. The way the grammar is phrased, I would infer from the baptism that it was only Jesus that heard it. Here, the audience is now more.
Yeah, it's explicit. Listen to him.
Yes.
It has to be someone else.
Yes.
So that they know to listen to Jesus.
Yes. 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 And so again, this question, this is my son. And again, playing with that, and I don't know from the text, but was Mark suggesting or implying more than just adoption? Yeah. Baptism was more than that. And we're continuing to see signs at the Transfiguration. So, this is the question that I have. And so let me jump ahead. If we read this in Matthew's Gospel, I think it's clear. I don't think there's a shadow of a doubt in my mind. In Matthew's Gospel, they're on a mountain. Moses and Elijah are there. Moses talked to God on a mountain. And Moses then gave the Torah to the people. Elijah meets God on the mountain Carmel. Right? So I think those are a lot of Jewish images that Matthew's audience would recognize. I think Matthew's audience would also recognize this. Moses is the author of the Torah, the first 5 books of the Bible. Here is Moses. Does that symbolize Torah? And so does the Torah point to Jesus? In other words, is the Torah fulfilled in Jesus? I wonder if Matthew is suggesting that. Elijah becomes a symbol of the prophets. So again, that second part of the Hebrew Bible, which would have been written at the time, does the prophets point to Jesus? So in other words, is Matthew telling his audience that the Torah and the prophets, the law and the prophets, are fulfilled in Jesus? This is why Jesus is so important. In Matthew's gospel, that makes perfect sense to me. In Mark's gospel, which is what we're doing tonight, these are all of my questions. Would Mark's audience know Moses? Maybe. Would they know Elijah? Maybe. So, for them, how is this story understood? And it raises questions for me. And so I'm wondering, would Mark's audience, being Gentile, would they have heard of Moses? Would they have heard of Elijah? And maybe they did. Maybe these are the 2 Jewish figures they know about. And then for them it's like, oh yeah, they're meeting with Jesus. But it's hard to tell. And so this is, the way Mark tells it, which is very cool, it's like I'm wondering about just the images and the message to it. But Jesus becomes transfigured. It's a cool Greek word. I think the Greek is actually metamorphosis. It's a completely kind of change, right? And then, of course, there's the last of the secrets. So when they're getting ready to go down, he says, "Don't tell anybody."
Again?
I think it's at verse 9, chapter 9. They observed, as they were coming down from the mountain, he warned them to tell no one what they had seen until after the Son of Man had risen from the dead. They observed the warning faithfully, though among themselves they discussed what rising from the dead could mean. So there's a hint there. There's a hint there. Rising from the dead, what is that?
I think before we go into everything else, we should take a very quick commercial break.
Excellent.
Be still, my soul, your best, your heavenly friend.
Every Christmas, a story unfolds, and when the holiday spirit fills the air, the most precious gift arrives. Unwrap the joy of the holiday season with Atlantic Bank. Finance life's greatest gifts, from memorable holidays to new opportunities. This season, celebrate with our competitive interest rates, discounted bank fees, and convenient repayment terms. With every approved personal loan, get a chance to win one of 60 fantastic prizes. All approved loans from now until December 22nd, 2023 will be entered into a grand Christmas raffle. Celebrate the joy of love, family, and new beginnings this holiday season.
Looking for a great investment? Matos Real Estate has the answer with this turnkey, newly built hotel commercial space in Orange Walk Town, Constructed in 2017 and housing 2 businesses, it is the commercial building offering approximately 18,932 square feet of both commercial, retail, and hotel space along the Philip Golson Highway in Orange Walk Town. The ground floor is measuring 85 by 104 feet, laid out with an open space. Attached to the original structure is an additional enclosed space used as a warehouse measuring 85 by 48 by 101 feet. Besides being fully furnished, the building also comes with a Gentrack generator that provides power to the entire structure in the event of a power outage. All rooms are equipped with air conditioning, and the building can easily be converted for usage of a call center or a financial institution. The lot size is 0.4276 acres. If you have any additional inquiries, contact Matus Real Estate for all your real estate needs.
Your one-stop marketing shop is Dolphin Productions. Contact us for graphic designing, printing, banners, billboards, t-shirts, embroidery, promotional items, ID cards, and so much more. Give us a call at 223-1837 to get your business marketed. Find us on Facebook and Instagram or email us at info@dolphinbc.com to get your order in. Dolphin Productions, bringing ideas to life.
Warm greetings from the Softy family. As the festive season approaches, we want to take a moment to express our gratitude to you, our valued customer. Thank you for choosing and being a part of our Softy family. Your support has been the foundation of our success. Wishing you a Christmas filled with love, happiness, and the company of those dear to your heart. Merry Christmas and a prosperous New Year.
Come on! When hungry or craving, when laughter or tears, enjoy the best snacking or flavors are here. Asadas, bocadas, chiladas, doradas, Felician for snacking, done right and done here.
Done right, done here.
Discover the diverse flavors of genuine Costa Rican coffee from Café Brit. We feature all classic favorites and have expanded our collection with new blends. Whether you want to stick to the flavors you're used to or want to explore different tastes, we can assure consistent quality across all our products. With over 35 years of experience, we are confident in our perfected coffee blends. Rest assured that we use the beans from Costa Rica when roasting our signature blends, including dark roast, light roast, espresso. We love creating new blends and discovering new ways to enjoy Costa Rican coffee. Among our new flavors are breakfast blend, afternoon blend, fusion. Our seasoned coffee roasters have over 3 decades of experience under their belts, mastering the techniques in making the perfect coffee blend. Shop today.
Be still, my soul. The Lord is on your side. Bear patiently the cross of grief or pain.
Well, welcome back from that commercial break. Let's continue with Mark.
Excellent, excellent. The next kind of famous story in chapter 9 is the cure of the epileptic or the demoniac, and this is that interesting story where the disciples themselves can't do it, and it looks like he even looks like he dies in verse 27. So the spirit throws the boy back and forth. Jesus rebukes the unclean spirit. It comes out of him. And so in verse 28, when Jesus had gone indoors, his disciples asked him when they were by themselves, "Why were we unable to drive it out?" And he answered, "This is the kind that can be driven out only by prayer." Mm. So there's something different in this story. But again, Jesus. Now, and then the next 3 verses again, so it's in Mark's Gospel, the second Passion prediction. And Jesus tells them, the Son of Man will be delivered into the power of men. They will put him to death, and 3 days after he had been put to death, he will rise again. But they did not understand what he said and were afraid to ask him. So the second Passion prediction. There's the little story about who's the greatest, and Jesus takes the little child and he says, well, anybody wants to be first, he's got to make himself last. And servant of all. Anyone who welcomes a little child such as this man welcomes me, and anyone who welcomes me welcomes not me, but the one who sent me. And you might like this. I think this is the passage. It's an ancient legend. But the child that's brought into the circle, who is the child?
That's one of the church fathers, right?
Good.
Who was it? Polycarp or something? No.
I think it's Ignatius of Antioch.
It's him.
I think that's the ancient tradition.
Yeah, you're right. I think it's Ignatius of Antioch. I was trying to. It was some one of them. I think it's
you did right. You did right. And Ignatius writes a letter to Polycarp, which is totally cool.
Yeah, I guess that was my connection.
You didn't know. You find. Yeah, excellent. Good call. And so there's also another interesting little couple of verses where there is somebody casting out devils using Jesus' name. Mm-hmm. And then Jesus is like, don't stop them. Anybody who's not against us is for us. Talk about leading others astray and coming down. And again, all of this is happening on his journey with his disciples to Jerusalem. Mm-hmm. So all of this is on the journey. So they're always talking and always moving. They're always kind of doing stuff. There's an interesting little story that comes up, the story of the rich young man that happens here. And it's kind of a neat story because the man is, Master, what must I do to inherit eternal life? And Jesus is, why do you call me good? No one is good but God alone. And you know the commandments. And so Jesus is quoting the law, right? And the man replies, Master, I've kept all these since my earliest days. And I love this line. And I think it's Mark that does it best, right? Jesus looked steadily at him, and he was filled with love. And he said, you do need to do one more thing. Go and sell what you own. Give the money to the poor, and you will have treasure in heaven. Then come and follow me. But his face fell at these words, and he went away sad. He was a man of great wealth. Let's keep him in mind, that image. Okay. The famous, danger of riches. It's easier for the camel to go through the eye of a needle. I'm more convinced that this isn't metaphor. I think Jesus is being realistic here. Look, it's very difficult for somebody with wealth to do certain things because there is a natural attachment to wealth and the honors that come with that. And it's easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle. I mean, it's that hard. And I don't think he's being metaphorical here. I think this is really hard. This is really, really hard. And so.
But in a sense, it's impossible for a camel to go through the eye of a needle.
Yeah. So this question of wealth and how a person is tied to their wealth, there has to be a way for them to sever the tie. I think is what Mark is saying here in the mouth of Jesus. Just a few verses later on is the third and final prediction of the Passion. And again, verses 32 to 34. They were going up to Jerusalem, and the Son of Man is about to be handed over to the chief priests and the scribes. Again, notice no Pharisees are mentioned. Mm-hmm. They will condemn him to death and will hand him over to the Gentiles, who will mock him and spit at him and scourge him and put him to death. And after 3 days, he will rise again. So again, there's this, and again, so if there is this image of a suffering servant, or if there's an image of a Messiah, or what Jesus is describing is very, very different, very hard to gather right there, or grasp, I think.
This idea was kind of prophesied in the Deuterocanonical book. I think the Wisdom of Solomon. I think in chapter 2, it kind of prophesizes Jesus' passion there.
I think Christians read into that. Yes, I think Christians read that prophecy. But that's a good call on that. Good call. We just had to teach in my Old Testament class. We had somebody do a presentation on the Book of Wisdom. Very good. Good man. Gentleman and a scholar. One of the interesting things is what Jesus talks about. His role. Now, anyone who wants to become great among you must be your servant, and anyone who wants to be first must be a slave. Verse 45, of chapter 10. For the Son of Man himself came not to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many. Yeah. And then here is the great conclusion of the journey, right? So, again, using that image of the sandwich, if the cure of the blind man at Bethsaida began the journey, Jericho is close, and we're going to have the cure of the blind man of Jericho. And it's different if you compare the two stories of the blind men and what Jesus does and how they do this. This guy is, Bartimaeus. When he hears Jesus, he's like, Jesus, have pity on me. Have pity on me. And so Jesus calls him over. What do you want me to do for you? What a touching, then the blind man says, let me see again. And Jesus said, go. Your faith has saved you. And again, notice, at once his sight returned and he followed him along the road. Mm-hmm. So the image of the blind, so in the first one, Jesus sends the guy, doesn't even send him back to his village, he's got his sight back, but he doesn't tell anybody. And now, here is Bartimaeus being able to see and to follow. And so, is it juxtaposed with the other disciples who saw but didn't understand? This part of vision. But Bartimaeus, I think, is kind of this cool kind of guy. Rabbi, let me see again. And your faith has saved you. And then he follows Jesus. And so this would conclude then what I would call like the fourth part of Mark's gospel. And we're going to enter now into Jerusalem.
Enter into Jerusalem.
and the way, and so again, if Mark's gospel is divided into a section called the ministry in Galilee and a ministry in Jerusalem, connected by a little, the travelogue, right? The ministry in Jerusalem, according to Mark, only lasts like 3 days. I mean, it's very, very short. Well, and so Jesus' time in Jerusalem, I think, if you look at the text, I think it's a calendar week. Mm-hmm. I think that's right. So when they were approaching Jerusalem, we've got the donkey and all this, and there's some interesting little pieces on this. Excuse me. So Jesus sits on a colt, which I think is a reference to Zechariah. And the cry of Hosanna comes from one of the Psalms. So there is this interesting little image. And again, there's the kingdom of our father David. And so Bray Brown, again, one of my commentators, made the comment. He said, notice again, here's an honor, but they misunderstand it because Jesus is coming to be crucified. So they come in, and then so in chapter 11, verse 20, it says the next morning. So that first day, Jesus went to the temple and expelled people and caused trouble and did all kinds of things. And now, the next morning, we have, here is Mark, and I forgot about this until I was kind of looking at it. Here is Mark teaching his disciples to pray. So it's a little shorter, right? And when you stand in prayer, forgive whatever you have against anybody, so that your Father in heaven may forgive your failings too.
Sounds familiar.
It does, doesn't it? Yeah. So now notice, so in verse 27, it says they came to Jerusalem again. So did that mean they
came, they left, and they
yes,
came again?
exactly. So it raises kind of questions with Mark and his, but so is Jesus moving in and out? So it did another day pass. So is he back in Jerusalem, back in the temple? So again, the chief priests and the scribes and the elders come, and they now, what authority do you have to act? And this is where Jesus gets really cocky. He says, let me ask you a question first. John's baptism, what was its origin? He says, if you tell me, then I'll tell you. Well, they're like, well, if we say this, the crowd's going to say something. If we say this, then we're going to look bad. We don't know. So Jesus said, okay, I don't know either.
This genius.
Yeah, he's got
them all figured out.
He's got them figured out. He's got them totally figured out. There's this interesting parable about the wicked tenants. Again, this is one of these stories, and it's going to sound weird to say this. Does Mark understand it to mean, could the tenants be the Jews? Or is the vineyard the temple? Are the scribes and the chief priests, are they kind of the wicked tenants? And whether, in other words, are they misusing the vineyard? Does Mark understand it that way? I don't know. But Mark includes it here as again, what's going to happen here, They seized the son and killed him. So is it another, not a prediction of his death? He's not predicting it, but in the parable, the son gets killed. So what's the owner of the vineyard going to do? And then is this a reference to the destruction of the temple, which in fact did occur? It was destroyed by the Romans. So there are some commentators that are suggesting, is Mark including this as fact, but putting it, it's going to happen soon. Another possibility is this, that is it, again, going back to Mark's audience, if they were Gentiles and and again, if that time period is right under Nero and some of the, if they're experiencing a lot of persecution, then here's another way in which persecution is shared by Jesus and then maybe shared by the audience. It's kind of an interesting kind of question. There's of course, the great question on taxes to Caesar, which again, Jesus. Again, here's this really interesting parable with the Sadducees. And again, now the Sadducees and the chief priests, they're plotting against Jesus. So this is that great story of the resurrection. And they're like, Rabbi, you believe in the resurrection. Explain this story. So, a guy marries this woman and he dies. But the guy's got 6 more brothers. And, are accustomed. So each brother, he dies. And then, so they're setting a story up, So they're like, okay, Mr. Rabbi, smart guy, resurrection, tell me, who's the wife? Who belongs? Well, Jesus kind of went, no.
And this story is kind of like, it's not exactly the same, but it's rather similar to Tobit.
Yes. Yeah. Good call. Good. Yeah. What I like to point out is that here is an example of the Sadducees, and again, I don't want to say maybe a party might be like a political party, or more maybe of a traditional understanding of Judaism. They don't hold into the resurrection, or a resurrection of a body. And their reason is, and it's a valid reason, is it's not in Torah. Moses doesn't say anything. The Pharisees also hold a tradition called the oral Torah. So when Moses was on the mountain, there's a lot written down, but they also talk about things. Who can say, right? But as tradition and custom unfolded over time, one of the things that the Pharisees adopt, and I think it's a result of enculturation as well, is this notion of life after death. And the Pharisees hold that. It's different than how the Christians understand it, but the Pharisees believe in a life after death. The Sadducees don't. And so there will be debates in the other Gospels between Sadducees and Pharisees regarding that very issue. So here, this is specifically pointing out the Sadducees and their disbelief in the resurrection. And I'm just going to conclude here. So this ministry in Jerusalem will end, and it actually ends with this unique reading from Mark, which we read the first Sunday of Advent. And it's the master of the house who goes away, and when is he coming back? Well, we don't know. Watch, be ready, and ready to go. And so this is the transition now from Mark in his gospel of the ministry in Jerusalem to the Passion. And it begins with, it was 2 days before Passover and the Feast of the Unleavened Bread. And the chief priests, there they are, and the scribes were looking for a way to arrest Jesus by some trick and have him put to death. So there it is. We got it going. And so as the story now unfolds, this is how Mark tells it, right? So he has the anointing at Bethany, the unknown woman. And again, this is where I'm quick to stay focused on the gospel. So according to Mark, the woman is unnamed. We don't know who she is. She's not the woman caught in adultery. She's not Mary Magdalene. Why? Because Mark specifically says she's not named. We don't know. And it's a reference to, and Jesus says, she's anointing me for my burial. Judas Iscariot is now approached by the 12 priests with an offer to hand Jesus over. They were delighted to hear it and promised to give him money. And he began to look for a way of betraying him when the opportunity should occur. Verses 10 and 11 of chapter 14. So Judas is now set up.
Would there be any indication of what day this happened?
Excellent question. No. If we've got, 2 days before Passover and the Feast of Unleavened Bread, the next day was the first day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread. And this is a question I always raise with my Old Testament students, right? That culturally, things have changed. And so I'm not Jewish, and I can't speak with great authority on this. But according to Torah, the Feast of Unleavened Bread is a week long.
Okay.
And 1 day during that week, Passover is celebrated.
Okay.
The custom now, I think, is the week, and maybe Hasidic and real Orthodox Jews celebrate this week of unleavened bread, but it seemed to be collapsed now until the day of Passover and the Feast of Unleavened Bread being the same day. But traditionally, the Feast of Unleavened Bread is a week long, and Passover happens to be on 1 day of that, depending on how it falls during the calendar week. So again, so it was 2 days before Passover and the Feast of Unleavened Bread. So is just how, and again, this is where I raise questions now about Mark and his understanding of Judaism. Is he getting things a little bit together? Because the Feast of Unleavened Bread is a week long.
Yeah.
And then Passover would be,
Yeah, I asked because I was thinking about the Didache. I know it mentions fasting on Wednesdays and Fridays. And earlier, I think this last episode, Jesus mentions that while the bridegroom is here, not to fast. And so I think like the Eastern Christians in the early church, they would see Wednesday as a day of fasting. I think they traditionally attribute it to the day that Judas betrays Jesus, and then Friday for the day of his death.
I think that's right. I've heard that. I have to confess, my knowledge of some of the ancient traditions is kind of slanted in a couple of areas, and so there's a couple of areas. Boy, I don't know that. You want to read and kind of get more on it. I'm not 100% sure. I think you're right. And this is a challenge. I know there are different understandings of, with our Adventist brothers, Christians, and how we kind of look at this, right? The Roman calendar that was used, the first day of the week is what we would call Sunday. And the Romans named each day of the week after one of the heavenly bodies that they could see, right? Now, the best example is, I think, in Spanish. All right, so what's Monday in Spanish? Lunes.
Yeah.
Well, lunar, moon, right?
Monday.
Yeah, exactly right. So what's Tuesday? Martes.
Okay. Mars?
Exactly right. Wednesday?
Mercury?
Exactly. Miércoles, exactly right. Jueves? Jupiter. Viernes? Venus. Saturday in Spanish is sábado, and I think we get that from the word Sabbath.
Okay.
But traditionally it was Saturn. Exactly right. And those were the heavenly bodies that you could see, the 5 planets, the sun and the moon, and then you got them all. 4 planets: Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. Yeah, the 5 planets. And so if Passover occurs, the Jewish calendar, the day begins at sunset. So we would say Friday at sunset to Saturday at sunset is the day. But we could also sit and look at that as Friday afternoon is one day, Friday night to Saturday night is the second day, and then Sunday morning is the third day.
Yeah, it's kind of like the whole 3 days things from the Friday of Jesus' death to his resurrection, like how it was 3 days, even though it wasn't like a 7 to 2 hour period.
That's exactly right. Yeah. So just the question of just how, and it would be, and again, that's why Matthew's gospel is so interesting, because it's so Jewish, and the kind of the dates and times, and it just kind of lends itself. John actually lays that out a little bit more. So, but Mark and his little questions here of what was going on the day before, but he's moving the time closer. But exactly as you kind of count the days and kind of, I think there's going to be an extra day in the week, I think. So we predict the prediction of Judas. There's the institution of the Eucharist, and then Peter's denial is foretold. And then the Garden of Gethsemane. And one of the things that's really interesting about this, I think, is at the Passion. So this is Mark again. So we had 3 predictions of the Passion. And I read this today and I thought this was touching, right? So when they come to a plot of land called Gethsemane, so this is 14 verse 32, Jesus said to his disciples, "Stay here while I pray." So here's the group, right? So one step is Jesus separates himself from the group. And he has John and Peter and James with him. Then he's going to separate himself from Peter, James, and John. And then he's going to throw himself down on the ground in prayer. So he's moving from the group to a small group, to alone, to prostrate on the ground. So there's the three kind of movements or steps. Another 3 is he will come back each time, 3 times, to find the disciples sleeping. So we kind of see this happening. And then one little interesting, I'm going to kind of jump ahead here. Let's make sure I get my verse here. Yeah. So when Jesus is on the ground praying, so chapter 14, verse 36, he mentions the phrase, Abba, Father. So again, this question of sonship that began with the baptism, it's more and more, this is not just an adoption question. This is son, right? Abba, Father. What I want to point out, and this is what the commentator said, is that in Mark's gospel, he has Aramaic and then the translation into Greek.
Yeah, I was just going to point out, like, do the Gentiles know that word, Abba?
I think that's why he translates it. What's interesting, so the Passion begins with a prayer. The Passion will end with a prayer on the cross. And so Mark, again, if you wanted to look at Mark's sandwich.
Yeah.
This is an interesting one I had never seen before until the point. So it be the Passion, so he's going to be arrested just a moment after this.
It's like the final act in a play.
Yeah. And it's framed by a prayer in Aramaic with a Greek translation and Aramaic in a Greek translation. And again, tonight I was kind of praying, I'm like, oh, that's very cool. So again, these little, to use the image of a sandwich is kind of interesting, but Mark frames so many things. It's just very, very clever.
It's like there's a setup and there's a payoff.
Yes.
And if you notice it, so it's like so much
more very
satisfying.
clever, very, very clever.
Yeah.
So it goes back to my esteem of Mark, or for Mark as an author, that the way he sets the story up and tells the story, there's a great skill.
And it doesn't seem forced. It's like, it's just natural.
Yeah. It's elegant. It really is elegant. And so, how does the Spirit move him to present and tell the story? And it goes back then to Matthew and Luke. I'm going to say the term, respect Mark's telling that they're going to borrow from it. As a matter of fact, Matthew's going to use, I think, like 600 verses of Mark. And I think there's like 680 verses or something like that, and uses virtually every one of them. And some of them are just direct quotations.
Mm-hmm.
So we've got the question, Jesus is going to be arrested. And what's interesting is that when Judas identifies him with the kiss, Judas uses the term rabbi. He doesn't call Jesus Lord. He doesn't call Jesus Jesus. He refers to him as rabbi, which is what the others called him, the people on the outside, not the disciples. So is this an indication that Mark is using that, Jesus is really outside the group? So he gets arrested. The young man following with nothing on. So verse 51. So again, I thought this was an interesting comment from Ray Brown. So remember the rich young man who was asked to give away everything and follow.
The one you said to keep in mind, yes.
Here is a young man who gives away everything to escape. And you see this this juxtaposition of Jesus. If you want to follow me, give away everything you have to follow me. And here's somebody giving away everything he's got to flee. And it's something I had never seen or heard pointed out before. And again, it's like, oh, wow. Is that this image? Is this the guy? Is this who this is, you know? Or is this another, you know, example of just somebody just abandoning Jesus? You know, they're leaving everything they've got to get away from it, to get away.
Yeah.
Make it jump, man. So, we've got, again, so Jesus is arrested. He's brought before the high priest and the chief priest, the elders and scribes. So again, Pharisees are not mentioned. And I don't know why. I don't know why
that's an interesting remark to make. Like they even mentioned, I think in like other historical documents, like Josephus mentions the Pharisees a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's interesting that you're right. I never noticed before they're completely omitted.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I think that's Matthew does something different. I think Matthew suggests a sympathy with the Pharisees. There might be disagreement in interpretation in Matthew's gospel. But here, the people that are deliberately after Jesus, and I think this might be, how do I phrase it? Is Mark borrowing, you know, from historical tradition? At the same time, again, I'm wondering if Mark's audience is being persecuted, it's the religious and political figures that are controlling the persecution. In the Passion, it's the religious and political figures that are manipulating Jesus' trial and condemnation. So is Mark helping his community? Jesus was in the same boat as you guys, all of us. You know, those are the people that, you know, they were out to get him. There are, so that use of three, right? Peter denies Jesus 3 times. And it's interesting that again, as Jesus is being accused of being a false prophet, he prophesied that Peter would betray him and deny him, and that's what's happened.
You know, an interesting way, if you know, Mark was the interpreter for Peter, and if, you know, this is coming from Peter, he's leaving out his dirty laundry saying, I betrayed Jesus.
Yeah. And I find this such a touching story, right? So Met tradition says this, right? Here's Peter telling Mark this, yeah, I did. And then a few years later, tradition has that when Peter is crucified, in all humility, he says, I'm not worthy to die like he did.
So it's inverted.
Yeah. And you can just see probably carries that. And I suspect the resurrection would help, you know, but would carry that guilt or that shame that Mark reflects here. And it would be the resurrection appearances where, you know, Jesus, I think this is a story. So there's is it in Matthew or Luke? I can't remember now. Where after Peter catches all the fish, you know, I think Jesus said, you know, throw your nets over there, and they get filled out of fish. And then Peter looks and said, leave me, Lord, I'm a sinful man.
Yeah.
I think
it's like his first appearance, right?
Yeah. I've always wondered, is that the Peter after the resurrection? Here's Peter who has betrayed Jesus. Jesus appears at the resurrection. And what does Peter say? Leave me, Lord, I'm a sinful man. Right? And what does Jesus do? Come on, bud. No, come on. We're okay. So I think this is a powerful piece.
Yeah.
And if Mark is telling, then that this is coming from Peter, right? I mean, that would be a tradition. And so it's a real powerful piece for Peter to be able to say that.
Oh. So, with that, is there anything else to say about the Gospel of Mark?
Read the Gospel of Mark for Advent. Read Mark and let Mark, because you're going to hear just snippets during the year and you're going to miss stories. And we glossed over little pieces. Read Mark and get the impact and the dynamic nature of Jesus in this gospel.
Oh, well, that's a nice note to end on. I know you like to end with prayer, so should we go into that?
Okay. And we'll end with my my Advent prayer. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. O good and gracious God, the new year approaches, and for many it is a time of making resolutions. For many it will also become a time of forgotten and broken promises. You are the God of clarity, commitment, choice, and covenant. Let us, you and I, make a promise, a resolution. Let us promise that you will be my God and that I will be one of your people. Let us promise that during the next year, you will continue to draw me towards you, and I will try to be attentive and respond with all my heart. Let us promise that you will continue to point the way, and that I will continue to follow, though my path may be crooked, and I may stall along the journey. Let us promise that for each step I take towards you, you take twice as many towards me. And in those days when I can walk towards you, may you run towards me. Let us promise that we will meet, you and I, somewhere in the middle. Let us promise. In the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit.
Well, with that, we've concluded this 3-episode overview on the Gospel of Mark. And it's amazing how much tiny pieces of trivia, tidbits, just general knowledge we've been able to get just from this. So I think, just like you mentioned, we should encourage the listeners to just read the Gospel of Mark. Look deeper into these things. I think before starting the series with you, I would have just seen Mark as just the shorter version of Matthew or something. It's like who cares? It's Mark. Like, why read Mark? But just letting Mark be Mark, that it really gives a new insight. Taking out this extra fluff and just seeing this first gospel. It's all those people needed to know for their salvation at the time, I suppose.
Yeah.
And so it was good enough for them.
Yeah, I think so. I think nicely said. Nicely said. Yeah.
So I guess.
Thank you, Will. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for this wonderful series. And hopefully, sometime in the future, maybe we'll have something like this again. On what? We don't know. But hopefully there's something. So thank you all for listening. This has been the end of the Be Still My Soul 3-episode series on the Gospel of Mark. Good night.
Good night. Thank you.
Be still, my soul. The Lord is on your side. Bear patiently the cross of grief or pain. Leave to your God to order and provide.
Every Christmas, a story unfolds, and when the holiday spirit fills the air, the most precious gift arrives. Unwrap the joy of the holiday season with Atlantic Bank. Finance life's greatest gifts, from memorable holidays to new opportunities. This season, celebrate with our competitive interest rates, discounted bank fees, and convenient repayment terms. With every approved personal loan, get a chance to win one of 60 fantastic prizes. All approved loans from now until December 22nd, 2023 will be entered into a grand Christmas raffle. Celebrate the joy of love, family, and new beginnings this holiday season.
Looking for a great investment? Matus Real Estate has the answer with this turnkey, newly built hotel commercial space in Orange Walk Town, constructed in 2017 and housing 2 businesses. It is the commercial building offering approximately 18,932 square feet of both commercial retail and hotel space along the Philip Golson Highway in Orange Walk Town. The ground floor is measuring 85 by 104 feet, laid out with an open space. Attached to the original structure is an additional enclosed space used as a warehouse measuring 85 by 48 by 101 feet. Besides being fully furnished, the building also comes with a Gentrack generator that provides power to the entire structure in the event of a power outage. All rooms are equipped with air conditioning, and the building can easily be converted for usage of a call center or a financial institution. The lot size is 0.4276 acres. If you have any additional inquiries, contact Matus Real Estate for all your real estate needs.
Your one-stop marketing shop is Dolphin Productions. Contact us for graphic designing, printing, banners, billboards, t-shirts, embroidery, promotional items, ID cards, and so much more. Give us a call at 223-1837 to get your business marketed. Find us on Facebook and Instagram or email us at info@dolphinbc.com to get your order in. Dolphin Productions, bringing ideas to life.
Warm greetings from the Softy family. As the festive season approaches, we want to take a moment to express our gratitude to you, our valued customer. Thank you for choosing and being a part of our Softy family. Your support has been the foundation of our success. Wishing you a Christmas filled with love, happiness, and the company of those dear to your heart. Merry Christmas and a prosperous New Year.
Come on! When hungry or craving, when laughter or tears, enjoy the best snacking or flavors are here. Asadas, bocadas, chiladas, doradas, delicious for snacking, done right and done here. Anytime to Snackers.
Done right, done here.
Discover the diverse flavors of genuine Costa Rican coffee from Cafe Rip. We feature all classic favorites and have expanded our collection with new blends. Whether you want to stick to the flavors you're used to or want to explore different tastes, we can assure consistent quality across all our products. With over 35 years of experience, we are confident in our perfected coffee blends. Rest assured that we use the beans from Costa Rica when roasting our signature blends, including dark roast, light roast, espresso. We love creating new blends and discovering new ways to enjoy Costa Rican coffee. Among our new flavors are breakfast blend, afternoon blend, fusion. Our seasoned coffee roasters have over 3 decades of experience under their belts, mastering the techniques in making the perfect coffee blend. Shop today.